Morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Okay, so our first stop today is a Mishnah in Maseches Sukkah, Daf Chaf Hey. I think I actually learned this with some of you uh, when we were doing Maseches Sukkah. And the Mishnah tells us this is all preparation for the next halacha. The Mishnah tells us Shluchei mitzvah piturim min hasukah, that if you're in the midst of doing a mitzvah, you are putter from the mitzvah of sukkah. You're putter from living in a sukkah on sukkahs. That's all we need to see. The Gemara now says, Minahani mili. From where do we know this? Detanu Rabbanan, as our sages taught, B'shivtecha b'veisecha, prat la'osek b'mitzvah. When you have to have the words of Torah upon yourself, upon your heart, B'shivtecha b'veisecha, when you are living or dwelling in your house. And says the Brisa, prat la'osek b'mitzvah. This excludes when someone is doing a mitzvah already, that they are exempt from having these words upon their heart. Uvelechtecha v'derech, and when you go on the road, prat l'chasan. This is to the exclusion of a chasan who is waiting to do the mitzvah of consummating his marriage. He is putter from the mitzvah of, let's say, davening Ma'ariv and reciting Kriya Shema. Mikan Omru, from here we learned, Hakonesis habesula pater ve'es ha'almana chayev. From here we learn that if a person is getting married, if he's going to be consummating his marriage with a virgin, so then he is exempt from Kriya Shema. But if he's consummating his marriage with a woman who's her second marriage, then he is not exempt from Kriya Shema. Now, what is the difference between the two? Apparently, there's more of the sense of unsettlement that a person has, or certain nervousness that a person has when he's concerned about consummating his marriage with a virgin, um, uh, um, because there's no experience there. But and he's also got to be concerned about rupturing a membrane. And that's why he's exempt, because he's in the midst in I guess immersed in thoughts of how he's going to do this, and it's creating nervousness, and so therefore he's exempt from Kriya Shema. But a woman who has experience that where there is no such concern, so then he can fulfill both, and therefore he has to fulfill the mitzvah of Kriya Shema. The Gemara's question that is being asked here is my mashma. Where do you see from the pasuk that of b'shivtecha b'veisecha uvlechtecha v'derech, that if you are in the midst of doing one mitzvah, you are exempt from another mitzvah? So Amar Rav Huna kederech, ma derech rishus af kol rishus. So Rav Huna says it's basically like your pathway. The Torah says that when you are walking along your path, you shall recite Kriya Shema and engage in all mitzvahs. But just like when you're walking on the path, you are doing so at your own volition, not doing God's bidding, but rather going along on your own business. So too, anytime you're taking care of your own business, you have to stop what you're doing to recite Kriya Shema or to do any other mitzvah. La'afuke hai de b'mitzvah asuk. But if you are immersed in the performance of a mitzvah already, then you are exempt from performing other mitzvahs. That's the implication of the words b'shivtecha b'veisecha uvlechtecha v'derech. But so the Gemara questions that, and it says Milo askinen de ka'azul lidvar mitzvah v'ka'amer rachmana likri. But one second, the Torah just says when you're walking along the path. Maybe you're walking along the path to do a mitzvah, and the Torah still says you have to recite Kriya Shema. So where do you see that just because you're doing a mitzvah, you're exempt from reciting Kriya Shema? So the Gemara says, In kain lemakra b'sheves uveleches, my b'shivtecha uvelechtecha, beleches didachu demichayvis, habeleches de mitzvah petiras. So the Gemara says, well, why then does the pasuk say b'shivtecha b'veisecha, when it is your sitting or your dwelling in your home, or you're walking on the path? Let it say when it is sitting at home and walking on the path. The fact that the Torah says it is you're sitting in the home and you're walking on the path, it implies that you are only obligated to stop what you're doing and recite Kriya Shema when you are doing something that is non-mitzvah related, but rather you're doing it for your own needs or your own desires. So the Gemara then asks, Ihachi, afilu kone sasalmana nami. So then why is there a differentiation between marrying a virgin versus marrying a woman who's not a virgin? So what difference should it make? Both of them are a mitzvah. You're consummating a marriage, so you should be exempt in both cases. So the Gemara answer is kones habasula tarid, kones almana lo tarid. The answer is because consummating a marriage with a virgin causes distraction, meaning that a person is nervous about how he's going to do this, whereas with a woman who's been married before, there is not the same level of nervousness. So you mean to tell me that you're only exempt from all mitzvahs if you're distracted? So are you to suggest that if a person is emotionally distraught because he just heard that his boat carrying merchandise sunk in the ocean, that he would be patur from Kriya Shema? The Gemara says, "V'chitema hachanami v'ha'amarav Rabbi Abba Bar Zavda amarav avil chayev b'chol mitzvah samuris b'torah chutz min hatfilin sharei nemar bahen pe'er." So 1 second, but an avel, a person who's just experienced the death in his family, is still chayev in all mitzvahs except for tefillin, because tefillin is an adornment of beauty, and an avel is not supposed to adorn himself with beauty in a time of the death of a loved one. So how can you tell me that just because a person is emotionally distraught or distracted, that they are exempt from Kriya Shema? The Gemara answers, Hacha tarid tir de mitzvah, hasam tarid tir de rishus. So the Gemara says, no, there's a difference between emotional distraction when you're thinking about doing a mitzvah versus emotional distraction when you're just upset about something going on in your life which is not mitzvah related. So the conclusion of the Gemara is as follows, that if you're physically engaged in doing a mitzvah, or even mentally engaged in doing a mitzvah, so then you are exempt from other mitzvot that could potentially compromise your current engagement in the first mitzvah. So if I am on the road, I'm traveling because I heard that there is a Jewish boy or girl that has been kidnapped and is being held for ransom, and I've been dispatched by the Jewish community to go ahead and win them back and bring them back home to the Jewish community, and I'm traveling. And it happens to be that over my travels it coincides with the holiday of Sukkot, so the halacha is I'm exempt from the positive commandment of dwelling in a sukkah. If I'm emotionally distracted because I'm very nervous before on my wedding night, before consummating my marriage with a first time, this is her first marriage, she's inexperienced, so then I am also patur from Kriya Shema. Now, this does not give license for a person to violate a negative commandment. So, for example, just because I'm going to ransom the child back and bring them back to the Jewish community does not give me license to violate Shabbos, right? It just gives me license to exempt myself from a positive commandment. Because I'm so engaged in this mitzvah, I can put aside another mitzvah. Now, you're asking yourself the question, what does this have to do with the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda? So that's what we're going to get to now. At first, any questions on this piece of Gemara? Okay, if not, we'll move on.
Rabbi, a quick question, just getting back to the, which maybe for a lot of us can be a little bit more relatable, is sometimes we have things in our life, it may be a business issue or other sort of social issue that's really weighing down on us, really, really bothering us. And then we come to Dublin. Let's say we go to Dublin, but our mind is so um, upset with what's going on in our life in that particular maybe issue. So how would we look at that as being better for our David? Should we just go ahead with the David even though we know our mind is just cannot focus?
It's an excellent question. First of all, this is what we learned is in reference to the mitzvah of reciting Kriya Shema, which is one specific component of the davening. The reason why it's unique out of all of the other davening is because it's a biblical commandment to accept the yoke of heaven upon yourself, which is different from other davening, which is more in the form of supplication, of asking God for your needs, which really crystallizes most in the Shemona Esrei. Okay, so I want to make sure that we have that distinction correct. If a person is emotionally distraught and they're having difficulty mustering their thoughts together, they would still be obligated, as we saw in the case of a person whose boat just sank, that he's still obligated to recite the Kriya Shema. Okay? But what the Gemara there did not address is a person obligated to pray if he cannot collect his thoughts. There is an argument to be made that if a person is emotionally distraught, he's exempt from Shemona Esrei, not from Kriya Shema, but he's exempt from Shemona Esrei and the other parts of the davening. And this is based on the fact that there's another Mishnah elsewhere, I have to now go find it, that states that if a person has just returned from a long journey and his mind is unsettled, he can exempt himself for prayer for up to 3 days because of the fact that he needs to come back to himself. Okay? Now, this is brought down in the commentaries and in the poskim, but the conclusion of all of that discussion is that nowadays a person should still daven. Okay? In other words, even though technically the Gemara said that a person can exempt himself from prayer when he's emotionally distraught, but nonetheless nowadays the conclusion of the poskim is that he should still daven. Why is that? Because even on a good day, we have trouble mustering our thoughts. And therefore, if a person were to make the argument that I can't focus properly on my Shemona Esrei and therefore I'm exempt, he would probably go most days without davening Shemona Esrei. Because today, we all have ADD to one degree or another. We all have attention deficit to one degree or another, and even on my best day, I cannot say that I'm focusing on every single word. So therefore, you're right. It would be much better for a person to try his best to block his distressing thoughts from his mind. But you're right, there are some days when you just can't do it. Right? There are some days where you're just feeling so distraught over something that happened at work, or a tragedy in the community or in the family, and you're not able to focus on the davening. But you should daven anyway. You should daven anyway, and ask God in the course of your davening to please be understanding with your kavanah. And that's the way you should do it.
Rabbi, if I could just chime in on this topic, I'm just curious, like when you travel, for example, to Israel, I notice I myself I can't sleep on the plane, so I always daven shacharit on the overnight flights. But I noticed quite a number of people, obviously, they're out and by the time you arrive, it's past the Zman Kriya Shema, past the time of Shemona Esrei. I asked somebody once, and they brought up this point of that you could be exempt because of you made a point about for 3 days, that opinion. So I'm just curious how that applies to traveling to Israel, also like for the first few days, usually when you arrive, you're you're exhausted and your time is off, and getting up 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning is quite difficult. So if you wouldn't mind addressing that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, there's a medrash which asks the question, which one pasuk encapsulates the entire Torah. So you're probably familiar with Rabbi Akiva's statement that ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha ze klal gadol b'Torah. This is like the most important, or embodies the entire Torah, right? There's another opinion in the Medrash that says that the pasuk that embodies the entire Torah is es hakeves echad ta'aseh v'boker ve'es hakeves hasheni ta'aseh ben ha'arboim. That you shall offer the one sheep in the morning and the one sheep in the afternoon, referring to the korban tamid, the daily sacrifice that was offered in the temple. And the commentaries explain that the one thing that is the hallmark of the Jewish faith, and especially in contradistinction to other faiths, is that there's a consistency of practice throughout our lives, regardless of what's going on in our lives. And that in itself is emblematic of an Eved Hashem, of a true servant of God, who basically says, I'm putting aside all of my other issues. If it's time to daven, it's time to daven. Now, so you have to use that, ideal, and hold it up against the other issue, which is that if a person can't muster kavana, then technically he's exempt from davening. The fact of the matter is, as I just mentioned to Ron a moment ago, even on a good day when we're not on an airplane and we're just on our way to work, it's very difficult for us to muster the kavana properly. I'm speaking for myself, but the poskim say that this is true of most people. I'm hoping that you're better than I am in the way that you have kavana, but the fact of the matter is that we all have this shortcoming to one degree or another. The reason why many of us go to daven with a minyan at a set time every day is not necessarily because we want to garner the benefit of Kaddish and all of those other things that we gain when we daven with a minyan. But the fact of the matter is that there's an aspect of routine that is beneficial to us, in that when we incorporate going to a minyan at the same time every day, we create a regimen in our lives of that. Just like I go to work and I eat and I go to the bathroom and I go to sleep and I exercise and I do all the things that a human body needs, part of my daily routine is going to shul at a specific time. And this is what defines me as an Eved Hashem. And so while if a person is looking for a heter, they can certainly find an out of exempting themselves. They can't exempt themselves from Kriya Shema, by the way, as we just learned. There's nothing distraught about traveling that you can exempt yourself from Kriya Shema. The most that you could argue is that perhaps I can exempt myself from davening Shmona Esrei. You would still, by the way, have to still put on tefillin, because there's no emotional detraction that would exempt you from putting on tefillin. So, all of I don't find the argument particularly compelling, especially if you're on a Dreamliner where you can barely feel that you're on an airplane. The only inconvenience is that perhaps, you have to do it from your seat. So if you need a dispensation and you want to put on your tefillin sitting down, and you want to daven Shmona Esrei sitting down, that you certainly can do. But to say that you're exempt from talis and tefillin and Kriya Shema and Shmona Esrei, it just doesn't fly. It doesn't fly. Now, you get to Israel, you're jet lagged, you're exhausted. All right, so you don't have to go to the 6 a.m. minyan. That's in Shari Chesed when you first get to Yerushalayim. So you'll daven a little bit later. You'll get a wake up call for 9:30 instead of 6 a.m. and you'll daven a little bit later in your hotel room or wherever you are. But until you come back to yourself and you're feeling better, right? But to say you're just because I'm a traveler, I'm exempt, I think it's very difficult to make that argument in today's world. Okay?
Sorry, one last question on that. There's a makeup method, like let's say you forget, for whatever reason, like you forget to daven mincha, and then when you daven Ma'ariv, where you do a second Shmona Esrei to make up for the mincha, correct?
Correct.
So let's say, for example, you're jet lagged and you woke up at noon the first day that you arrive, the second day you arrive in Israel.
Uh-huh.
And obviously I would assume, like you didn't do it on purpose, but you would do a second Shmona Esrei during Mincha time.
Right, and you'd also have to put on tefillin at mincha.
Correct, right. So my question is, I will assume that you cannot do that, you know, lechatchila, right? That you would say, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to sleep until noon, and I'll just make it up for mincha. That method is meant as a like b'diavad, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
100%. Okay. Our second stop is a Gemara in Bava Kama Daf Nun Vav Amud Beis, and it talks about the laws of a shomer. Now, what is a shomer? A shomer is a guardian, and there are two different kinds of shomer. There's a shomer chinam and a shomer sachar. A shomer, has anyone heard the term shomer before? I hope you're familiar with those terms. A shomer chinam is an unpaid guard, and a shomer sachar is a paid guard. So, an illustration is, you come to me and say, I'm going on a trip, and I have my dog Fluffy. Would you mind keeping her in your home while I'm in Israel? And I say, sure, with the greatest of pleasure. Just leave Fluffy's dog food with me, and tell me how to take care of her. So there's a halachic difference if I'm being paid to watch Fluffy because I own a kennel, or if I'm doing you a personal favor and not taking payment for it. What's the halachic difference? If I'm watching Fluffy for free, then, and if someone breaks into my house and steals Fluffy, or if someone accidentally opens the door and Fluffy runs away, so then I'm halachically patur from compensating you for Fluffy's loss. But if I'm a paid guard, if I'm a shomer sachar, and I'm taking compensation from you, then the only time that I'm exempt from paying you for the loss of Fluffy is if there's a total onus, something that was almost like an act of God, completely unexpected. Either Fluffy dies of a heart attack, or or armed guards break into my house when I'm there, and they tie me up and take Fluffy. So then I'm exempt also as a shomer sachar. But anything less than that, like if one of my kids opens the door and Fluffy runs out, or if while I'm away I'm doing running errands and Fluffy's in the house, Fluffy jumps out the window, or someone comes in and takes Fluffy, so then as someone who's being compensated for watching your dog, I have to pay you for that. So that's the difference in halacha. Your level of responsibility is elevated if you're being paid for what you're doing. Okay, that's the basic principle. The Gemara in Bava Kama asks the following question. What if you're a shomer aveda? What if you are watching someone's lost item? You went outside, you found a dog, you bring it back into your house. What is and it's got the dog tag that says Fluffy, and you're from Etobicoke, however you pronounce that place. In Etobicoke, is that how you pronounce it?
Etobicoke.
Etobicoke.
Yeah.
Etobicoke. And Fluffy from Etobicoke is in your house, and you call the people and they say, well, we can't come until tomorrow. Okay, so you say, no problem, I'm going to watch your dog for you. What is your status? Is your status as a paid guard or an unpaid guard? So what would be your natural instinct to say? What would you say?
Unpaid.
You'd say you're an unpaid guard, right?
You're
Because
not going to get paid when you return it.
you're not going to get paid. You're being a good Samaritan, right? Which is a New Testament term. But anyway, so
Unless you say we get paid by the mitzvah that we acquire from doing it. But I don't know
okay,
whether
that's
mitzvah is
which is a beautiful thought, Paul, because of course God rewards us for every good deed that we do. In which case, there's no such thing as a shomer chinam. Anytime I do a friend a favor, I'm getting rewarded by
right.
God, right? Because I'm doing a chesed. But we're going to say there's a different factor here. So Rabba Omar kishomer chinam dami. Rabba says you're a shomer chinam. You're not getting paid for this, and therefore, if something happens, Fluffy jumps out the window, and she's lost. So then you're putter from all responsibility. And Rav Yosef Omar kishomer sachar dami. And Rav Yosef says, no, you are a paid guard. So now we have to understand Rav Yosef. Rabba Amar Kishomer Chinam Dami, Mai Hana'a Kamatile. So Rabba says, what do you mean? You're a Shomer Chinam. You're not being paid for this. What benefit are you possibly getting from this? And so Rav Yosef Amar Kishomer Sachar Dami. No, says Rav Yosef, you're a Shomer Sachar. You're getting compensation. Why? Behahi Hana'a de lo baya lemesav le rifta la'anya havi kishomer sachar. The benefit that you get, that you are exempt from giving bread to a poor man, makes you into a shomer sachar. So what does that mean? While I'm in the midst of taking care of Fluffy from Etobicoke, I don't have to answer the doorbell when a shliach mitzvah comes from Eretz Yisrael saying tzedakah, tzedakah, shalom aleichem, tzedakah. I can say to my wife, honey, don't answer the door. I'm too busy giving Fluffy a bath because she's all dirty, and I need to make sure that she is well preserved for her owners, and therefore we don't have to open the door to give money to the shliach mitzvah. Now, that's worth something, right? I mean, a machaya. I can exempt myself from opening the door and having to spend the next few minutes speaking to a guy who needs tzedakah, and I can exempt myself. I would pay. How much would you pay for the absolute privilege and not to feel guilt, to have a guilt-free exemption from opening the door from a guy who comes knocking for tzedakah? And by the way, you're not going to give him more than $5 or $10, right? But how much would you pay for not having to engage him? And someone says, don't feel guilty at all. It should not weigh on your conscience because you are exempt from this. How much would you pay for that? I'd probably pay 10 cents, 25 cents, $1 maybe. That's a marketable commodity, right? And the fact that I am currently engaged in doing the mitzvah of Hashavas Aved, I'm giving Fluffy a bath, that exempts me from opening the door. I'm getting a tangible benefit from being engaged in the mitzvah of Hashavas Aved. Okay, so that's called Pruta de Rav Yosef in other places in the Gemara. Rav Yosef says you are getting a tangible benefit. You can exempt yourself from other mitzvahs, like giving tzedakah to the guy at the door. And Rashi actually says this. Rashi says, "De lo boy lamesav rifta la'anya." You can exempt yourself from giving bread to the poor man. De ha'osek b'mitzvah patr min ha'mitzvah, because since you're engaged in one mitzvah, you're exempt from another mitzvah. Me uvalechtecha v'aderech nafgalan b'masecha sukkah. And this is derived from the pasuk uvalechtecha v'aderech. You only have to do a mitzvah when you're going on your path, but not if you're already on another path. And that's how I know that you are exempt. So you have now the background information that a person who is engaged in giving Fluffy a bath, preparing her to return her back to her owners, is patur from other mitzvot during that time. That's the theme of this halacha. And now we'll be ready. We're going to do one more stop tomorrow before we actually go into the text in Hilchos Tefillin, and then we'll be ready to go into the halacha. Okay, everybody? So we'll